And Sivee's talk is on investigating impacts of individual response on landscape level patterns in dynamic social ecological systems. Thank you for your patience, Sivee. Take it away.
Thank you, Alana. Can you see my screen?
I can. You just need to put it into presentation mode.
Yeah. Okay. And can you see my presentation as well now?
Yes, I can. It's looking great.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining in. I'm Sivee Chawla, and today I'm going to discuss an important topic in social ecological systems, and that is cross-scale dynamics. In complex systems such as social ecological systems, it's commonly observed that patterns emerging at one scale are a consequence of mechanisms operating at another scale. And when it comes to addressing issues such as natural resource management in social ecological systems, it's important to understand the relationship between the drivers and response variables across the scales. Now, in this talk, I'm going to take you away from marine systems and the coastal social ecological systems that we have been talking in past few talks, and I'll be focusing on the land resource system as social ecological system. What is a land resource system? A land resource system is defined as a delineable area of Earth's terrestrial surface that encompasses all attributes of the biosphere. It supports the life forms and is a primary source of various ecosystem services and goods. My focus here is on those land parcels and the land use transformations that often occur because of the urban activities, where the land is being transformed from rural and natural landscapes, such as forest, wetlands, and agricultural landscapes, to urban landscapes to set up industries, to have residential buildings, to have roads, etc. And when these land use transformations are not managed properly, it leads to urban sprawl. Urban sprawl is very common in peri-urban areas. Spatially speaking, peri-urban areas are shifting landscapes along the urban periphery, and they serve as functional spaces for urban well-being, resulting in the transformation of rural and natural landscapes into urban landscapes. That makes these areas spatially and temporally dynamic and leads to complex social and ecological interactions. The problem of urban sprawl is very prominent in Global South. For example, the city of Bangalore, which is also a case study in my PhD. And as we see in this time series map, how the built-up is engulfing all the land use land cover classes over the last two and a half decades. This happens because of the growth. The urban growth is mostly technology-led, where the urban social ecological system understanding is focused on urban actors and decisions. And in the process, the environmental and social issues erupting in the peri-urban areas are neglected. And neglect also includes neglect of recipient actors. These actors, however, rural inhabitants, are an integral part of peri-urban SCS and has a give and take relationship with the peri-urban areas for ages. However, when these land use transformations are occurring because of appropriation of land by urban actors, the rural actors' decisions are nothing but response to the environmental pressures and socioeconomic changes. The issue is that very little is known about the influence of decisions made by rural actors in the dynamic peri-urban SCS. So my objective here is to explore the consequence of interactions of rural actors that occurs at local level on the patterns at the landscape level. For the purpose, I developed a dynamic simulation model, which takes input as land use land cover maps. So I developed 100 simulated land use land cover maps, loosely based on Bangalore. And as you can see, these land use land cover maps were divided into land parcels or land cells, where each land parcel or the cell had a corresponding social ecological system attributes such as land use policies, information about the neighboring land use land cover patterns, the urban and rural population occupying those land use land cover parcels. And they were classified into 8 land use land cover types according to Government of India classification scheme. Now, this goes as an input into the model, along with all these social ecological system attributes. So we see here is in the model, the reaction diffusion equation is the overarching equation that takes input from 3 submodules: game theory, cellular automata, and spatial contextual information. The spatial and contextual information cellular automata deals with the neighboring land use pattern and changing land use policies, and it's not the hero of this objective for now, and therefore I'll focus on game theory, which goes as input and reaction diffusion and gives output as spatial configuration of the landscape. So here I focused on the pattern of urbanization as an SCS outcomes in form of by capturing the landscape metrics surrounding these urbanization patterns. So talking about game theory, we assumed that rural actors are the final decision makers in the land use transformation. So what actually happens is when the urban actors move out of their urban periphery, goes into the land in the land use land cover classes, which are not urban built, they have to interact with the rural actors to perform the land, to appropriate the land for the land use transformation. We captured these land use transform interactions using Hawk and Dove model that went as a game theory module, and that goes into the reaction diffusion equation. We designed our experiments according to the Hawk and Dove model, where we classified rural actors as Hawk based, that is, they resisted the change in land use, and or comply, that is, they complied with the change in the land use. We varied the level of resistance by changing the number of rural actors that resisted the change. So the percentage of rural actors in the landscape were actually representing the level of resistance changing from 0 to 100% for all the rural actors. Now, as you can see in this figure, every cell had one strategy, that is either Hawk or Dove, and it was spatially invariant, that is, Hawk and Dove players were randomly distributed in the entire landscape. Now, as an output, we had different maps for different level of resistance. Now, you see that we had for single input LULC map, we had very less urbanization when the resistance was very high after 24 years. That is when there were 100% Hawks, and when the resistance was quite low, that is there were only few Hawks comparatively, the urbanization was quite large. Urbanization is here shown by the red land parcels. It's not uncommon, it's a common sense, but what is more interesting here is to see the response of the spatial heterogeneity or the urban heterogeneity to the changing level of resistance. So we captured the spatial configuration metrics. There are different landscape metrics that are used to indicate heterogeneity in the landscape. I'm showing you here the result of clumpiness and number of patches. So in general, as the clumpiness increases, the heterogeneity in the landscape is an indicator of decrease in the landscape of landscape heterogeneity. Whereas if the number of patches increases, it indicates increase in the heterogeneity of the class. Now we see here the clumpiness, as the level of resistance decreased, the clumpiness decreased and the number of patches increased, which shows that there was an increase in the resulting urban heterogeneity. But the interesting part is that the response was non-linear. And also we can observe that there's a threshold beyond which the curves change their shape significantly. Now, what is the contribution of these results in theory? When it comes to natural resource management from social ecological system frameworks perspective, the key principle is that we should include the people who are affected by the rules into decision making. We know that peri-urban actors are an important integral part of peri-urban social ecological systems. They can both comply and resist the rule in these dynamic and shifting landscapes. Hence, it's not just sufficient to empower individual rural actors to resist the change in the landscape, but it's also important to focus that the group resistance can reach a threshold beyond which it becomes effective. Resistance is more effective when the number of actors crosses a certain threshold, enabling collective resistance. And mind you, this research is not only limited to peri-urban areas, it is applicable across complex and rapidly changing landscapes that we have, for example, our own GBR. What we are further going to do is to understand more into thresholds and the tipping points in dynamic landscapes characterized by heterogeneous actors. Thank you.